picture a city that has just placed a 1,000-foot iron tower in the middle of its skyline and told the entire world to come look at it. Now fill that city with 3 million people, half of whom are drunk, a quarter of whom are lost, and a tenth of whom are about to be ruined by something they thought nobody knew about. Add the smell of horse manure and coal smoke and bread baking and perfume so strong it makes your eyes water, and beneath all of that, beneath the glamour and the gaslights and the grand boulevards that Napoleon III's prefect tore through the old city like a surgeon's knife, add something else, something older, something that Paris has always had and always denied having, a darkness that runs through the city the way the Seine runs through its centre, and just as the Seine carries everything, the refuse and the flowers and the bodies of the unlucky, so does this other thing carry its own secrets, its own desperate people, its own quiet tragedies that nobody important wants in print. That's Paris in 1889, the most beautiful city in the world, the most hypocritical city in the world, a place where you can buy everything and admit to nothing, where pleasure is industrialized and shame is weaponized, and the line between the two shifts depending entirely on how much money you have, who your friends are, and whether someone in a building on the Ile de la Cité has decided that today is the day to notice you. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists strolling the grand boulevards, not as visitors admiring the new tower, not as respectable people attending the exposition and marvelling at the machinery of progress. We're living it. One person, one summer, one slow-moving disaster that everyone could see coming and nobody could stop. So I make these history stories, and honestly I have no idea if you're using them to fall asleep or if you're all just compulsive people who enjoy lying in the dark learning about things that would have got you arrested in 1889. Either way, get comfortable. Tonight we're going somewhere that didn't officially exist, a place that was on no map, that appeared in no official record, that nobody of consequence would ever admit to knowing about, and yet everyone knew. Here we go. Your eyes open to grey light, not darkness, not yet dawn, that particular shade of Parisian morning that is neither one thing nor the other, the light filtering through a single small window that faces not the street, but the interior courtyard of the building. A courtyard that never sees direct sun, a courtyard that smells permanently of wet stone and someone else's laundry, and the faint chemical smell of the tannery. 2 streets over, that should have been moved out of the arrondissement years ago, but hasn't been, because the owner knows someone who knows someone at the prefecture. You know about things like that now. You've been in Paris long enough to understand how the city actually works. 8 months. 8 months since you stepped off the train at the Gare d'Austerlitz, with a letter of introduction in your inside pocket and 47 francs in your wallet, and the absolute certainty, the kind of certainty that only 21-year-olds from the provinces can feel, that Paris was waiting for you specifically. Paris was not waiting for you. Paris did not notice you at all. You lie on your back in the narrow iron bed in the Chambre de Bonne on the 6th floor of a building on the Rue des Martyrs in the 18th arrondissement, and you listen to the building come alive around you. The woman in the room to your left, whose name you've never learned, begins coughing the deep, wet cough that she's been coughing since February. The man above you. There is no above you. You are directly below the roof, directly below the lead sheeting and the pigeons that walk on it all night. There is nobody above you but the birds and the sky. Below you, 5 floors of Parisians assembling themselves into their daily lives. You can hear it, the boots on the wooden stairs, the sound of water being poured, Someone's child crying with that particular early morning helplessness that children have, the cry that says, "I was asleep, and now I am not, and the world is too much already." The smell hits you even before you fully sit up. It's not one smell. It's the accumulated smell of everything that 8 months in a 6 franc-a-week chambre de bonne produces. The smell of your own unwashed body, which is not terrible but is present. The smell of the chamber pot you emptied yesterday but not thoroughly enough. The smell of paper and ink from the manuscript pages stacked on the small table. Your work from last night, the notes you took, the passages you copied out in your careful Bordeaux schoolboy hand, because Monsieur Pelletier's handwriting is frankly illegible, and someone has to make his articles readable before they go to the compositor. The smell of the candle you burned too late, the tallow leaving a greasy sweetness in the air that mixes badly with everything else, and under all of it, seeping up through the floorboards and through the courtyard window, the smell of Paris itself. Coal smoke and hoarse, wet cobblestones, the river, even here 3 kilometers from the Seine, even here on the hill of Montmartre that rises above the city like something not quite belonging to it. You can smell the river on certain mornings. A smell of silt and old things and the slow movement of water that has been carrying Paris's secrets for 2,000 years and will carry them long after everyone currently alive has been forgotten. Welcome to Paris in the summer of 1889, the year the tower went up, the year the city put on its best face and invited the world to come see, the year of the Exposition Universelle, 100 years after the Revolution, the Republic celebrating itself with machinery and electricity, and a 1,000-foot iron skeleton on the Champ de Mars that half the city's artists signed a petition calling a disgrace, and the other half simply stared at with their mouths open. You are Edouard Blanc. You are 21 years old. You arrived from Bordeaux in November of last year with a letter of introduction from your father's former business associate, a Monsieur Armand Tisserand, who knew a journalist named Gaston Pelletier, who sometimes needed a young man with decent handwriting and the willingness to do whatever needed doing for not very much money. Your father was a wine merchant. He was not a successful wine merchant. The distinction matters. You grew up surrounded by the evidence of a trade that should have been comfortable and wasn't, the books of accounts that never quite balanced, the creditors whose visits your mother handled with the smile that cost her something she never got back. When the opportunity came to go to Paris, your mother cried. Your father said, "Go and make something of yourself." Your younger sister stood on the doorstep of the house on the Rue des Salinières and watched you walk away without saying anything at all, which was worse than crying. That was November. This is July. The exposition has been open since May. The tower has been standing since March, and you've been working for Monsieur Gaston Pelletier at the newspaper Le Lampion for 8 months, doing everything that needs doing and a good many things that technically don't exist in any formal description of your duties. Le Lampion is a small political newspaper, very small. Its offices occupy the first floor of a building on the Rue Montmartre in the 2nd arrondissement, sandwiched between a printing house that smells of turpentine and a wine merchant that smells of everything. Wine merchants smell of when the barrels aren't quite sealed properly. The paper comes out 3 times a week. It has perhaps 8,000 subscribers, mostly in Paris, a few in the provinces. It is not prestigious, it is not powerful, but it is alive, which is more than can be said for several of its competitors who have folded in the past 2 years, And it survives because Gaston Pelletier is one of those rare journalists who can write quickly, write clearly, and find things out that other people don't know yet. That last quality, finding things out, is where you come in, not in any formal sense. Your official role is assistant, which means copyist, which means the person who arrives first and leaves last and does whatever falls in the gap between what Pelletier wants done and what the senior staff can be bothered to do. But 8 months in, you have become something more than that. You have become the person Pelletier sends out when he needs to know something without anyone knowing he wants to know it. You have become the invisible presence, the young man nobody looks at twice, the boy from Bordeaux who stands in corners and listens and remembers and comes back and tells Pelletier what he heard. It started small. Go to the café on the corner of Rue Vivienne and listen to what the traders are saying about the new tax bill. Go to the meeting in the Salle at the Hôtel de Ville and take notes. Not official notes. You won't be credentialed. Just stand near the back and write in your notebook. Go to the 3rd arrondissement and find out whether the factory fire was really an accident or whether someone has a reason to prefer it wasn't. Small things. Errands. Almost. And then, 3 weeks ago, Pelletier called you into his office and told you about the story. But that comes later. Right now, you need to get out of bed. The water in the basin is cold. It's always cold. There is no hot water on the 6th floor. Hot water is a luxury that exists on the lower floors of buildings, in the apartments with proper kitchens and properly functioning fireplaces and servants to heat things up. Up here, on the floor where the servants sleep and the journalist, pauvre, and the seamstresses and the assorted survivors of the city's appetite, the water is whatever temperature the morning left it, and this morning it is cold enough to make you inhale sharply when you splash your face. The coldness of it against your forehead is almost a sound, a sharp, involuntary sound in the back of your throat that you suppress, because the woman in the next room is still coughing and you don't want to add to the morning's misery. You look at yourself in the small mirror propped on the windowsill. The face that looks back is not quite the face that left Bordeaux. Paris has done something to it. Thinned it, maybe. Sharpened the jaw. Put lines under the eyes that weren't there in November. Made it more careful looking. Older. Your clothes are on the chair where you left them. Trousers. Shirt white, but the collar going grey no matter how many times you have it laundered. Waistcoat. Jacket that was new in November and is now merely decent. The elbows beginning to go thin. Boots that need resoling but will last another month if you're careful on the cobblestones. You're not a poor young man. You're something more specific and in many ways harder. You're a young man who is almost not poor, who has just enough to survive and not quite enough to live, who exists in the permanent anxiety of the gap between what Paris costs and what Paris pays to the people who haven't yet arrived. Pelletier pays you 65 francs a month. Your room costs 24. What remains goes to food, to transport when transport is unavoidable, to the single café crème you allow yourself in the morning at the bar of the Père Labarre on the Rue des Martyrs, because without that one cup of coffee you're useless until noon, to paper and pencils which you consume in quantities that still surprise you, to the occasional evening at the cheaper seats at the theatre or the music hall, because you have learned that Paris without entertainment is a city that will simply grind you into nothing, and you cannot afford to be ground into nothing. You have 17 francs left until the end of the month. 15 days. You do the mathematics without thinking about it. It has become automatic, this constant quiet arithmetic of survival. But first, coffee, and then the office, and then the story. The Rue des Martyrs in July is one of those streets that you have come to think of as properly Parisian, meaning that it contains more human life per metre than seems physically possible and makes no apology for any of it. The street slopes downhill from the butte of Montmartre toward the boulevards below, and this morning it is already fully alive with the business of the day, even though it is barely 7:30. The fishmonger has been here since 4. Her cart stands on the corner, and the smell of it reaches you before you turn the corner. That cold salt metal smell of fish on ice, the ice itself a small miracle in July, hauled overnight from the warehouses near the canal where it was cut in winter and just stored in sawdust, costing the fishmonger a centime per kilo that she will recover from the price of every sole and rouget she sells today. The fish lie on their bed of shaved ice with their eyes open, in that disconcerting way of fish, looking at nothing, and the water from the melting ice runs in thin channels across the cobblestones and catches the morning light. The bread smell comes from the boulangerie 3 doors down, pain ordinaire, pulling hot from the oven, the boy propping the door open with his foot as he carries the long trays to the window. 2 women have already stopped to buy. They stand with their bread under their arms, talking with the practiced efficiency of people who have 30 seconds before they have to be somewhere. Their voices overlap and complete each other, and neither of them looks at the other while they talk, both looking at the street, because in Paris you talk and watch simultaneously, the 2 activities not in competition. The street is narrow here, narrower than the great boulevards of Haussmann's imagining, but older, with a human scale that the new Paris sometimes loses in its love of grandeur. The buildings lean toward each other overhead. Between them, a strip of sky that is already turning from grey to the pale blue of a July morning. You walk downhill. The city comes to meet you as you descend. More carts, more smells. Coffee now, from the cafe ahead. The particular sharp, dark smell of French coffee that you still think is slightly too strong, but that you have come to need the way you need air. The sound of the newspaper seller on the corner calling the headlines, his voice carrying the particular flat urgency of someone who's been doing this since before sunrise. You buy L'Intransigeant for 5 centimes and tuck it under your arm without reading it yet. You'll read it at the cafe. Pelletier likes you to have read at least 3 papers before you arrive at the office. A preference you have come to understand is not about being informed, and is entirely about being able to say something intelligent when he looks at you over the edge of his own reading and asks what you think. The Perle Bar is 15 metres from your building, which is both its great advantage and its occasional disadvantage when you need to walk past it without stopping. This morning you stop. You order your café cream and stand at the zinc bar, which is cool and slightly sticky, and open the paper. The headline is not about Paris. It's about the Exposition. Of course it is. Everything is about the Exposition this summer. The number of visitors, 2 million so far, and the gates don't close until November. The achievements on display. The machinery hall where engines the size of buildings run in demonstration. The colonial exhibits, which you have visited once and left with a feeling you couldn't quite name, something between fascination and unease. The tower, always the tower. You look up from the paper. Through the cafe window, you can see a slice of the street, the carts and the pedestrians, and beyond them, rising above the roofline of the buildings opposite, nothing. The tower is not visible from here. It is 3 kilometres away on the other side of the city. But you know it's there. Everyone knows it's there. It has become a presence in the city the way the Seine is a presence, the way Notre Dame is a presence, something you orient yourself by even when you can't see it. Gustave Eiffel's tower, 300 meters of iron, the tallest structure in the world, assembled from 18,000 individual pieces machined to tolerances of a single millimeter, erected by 300 metalworkers in 2 years and 2 months, at a cost of approximately 8 million francs, and the lives of a small number of men who fell. The precise number of who fell is a figure the official records do not emphasize. When they announced the plan, the artists signed their petition. Maupassant wrote that he was leaving Paris and not returning until they took it down. The neighbourhood committees issued formal complaints. The working men of Paris who built it said nothing about its aesthetics. They were being paid 3 to 6 francs a day for dangerous work at heights that killed some of them, and the aesthetics were not their department. You finish your coffee, fold the paper, and begin the walk to the office. It takes 40 minutes on foot. You could take the omnibus for 15 centimes, but 15 centimes is 15 centimes, and your legs work perfectly well, and the walk takes you through parts of the city that you have come to think of as necessary, the way a priest thinks of his daily office, something that keeps you calibrated. You need to see Paris. You need to feel its size, its density, the way it presses against you from all sides and from above. The buildings taller than anything from home, the streets narrower, the sound of it constant and layered and occasionally so loud that you simply stop hearing it and move through the noise like a swimmer moving through water. Down from Montmartre, the hill dropping away under your boots, the cobblestones slightly slick this morning from the dew that settles on them even in summer, the sound of your footsteps different on the rounded stones of the old streets versus the flat paving of the newer ones, a difference in pitch that you've learned to hear without trying, your feet reading the city through the leather of your boots. Through the 9th arrondissement, the opera neighbourhood, where the new Palais Garnier rises from its island of cleared ground like something from a dream, the gold and the marble and the absurd beauty of the thing that people who have enough money to spend on operas apparently needed in the same city, that also has people sleeping in the street 200 meters away. You have been inside once, as part of a story Pelletier was doing on the administration of the city's cultural institutions, and you spent the whole time tilting your head back and looking at the ceiling and forgetting to take notes. You take notes now. You take notes the way other people breathe. Through the 2nd arrondissement, your arrondissement now, or at least the arrondissement where you work, the newspaper offices, the printing houses, the financial institutions, the passages couverts, the covered shopping passages with their glass roofs that filter the city light into something almost Mediterranean, the shops crowded on both sides, the floor of mosaic tile that clacks under your boots as you pass through. You use the passages when it rains. Paris is not kind to people caught in the rain without umbrellas, and your umbrella broke in March and has not been replaced. The office of L'Île Lampion at 8:45. The front room of the office is empty when you arrive except for the typesetter's assistant, a boy named Jules who is 12 years old and has the gravity of someone much older, already setting type with the methodical precision of someone who has been doing it forever, which relative to his 12 years he has. His fingers move through the lead type with the automatic confidence of a pianist who no longer needs to think about where the notes are, each piece plucked and placed with a small decisive click, the tray filling line by line from left to right. He looks up when you come in and nods once and looks back down. You have never had an actual conversation with Jules. You have reached an understanding of mutual respect without words. You hang your jacket. The office is warm already. It faces south and collects heat in a way that makes summer afternoons in here an exercise in concentration. You open the window that overlooks the narrow back courtyard. Not for fresh air exactly. There is no fresh air in the second arrondissement in July, but for movement of air, for the fiction of ventilation. On your desk, it is not your desk officially, you don't have a desk officially, but it is the table in the corner where you work, which is the practical equivalent. There are 3 items. A note from Pelletier. Come see me when you arrive. P. A sealed envelope with your name on it in handwriting you don't recognise. And a copy of yesterday's issue of Le Figaro folded to an interior page, to a small notice, perhaps 6 lines, that reports that a person, unnamed, described only as a notable of the political world, has resigned his position on a commission connected to the exposition due to unspecified personal difficulties. You read the notice twice. Then you take the sealed envelope and go knock on Pelletier's door. Gaston Pelletier is 53 years old and looks like what would happen if you took a bulldog and somehow made it into a journalist. He is short and broad, and his face has the particular texture of someone who has spent 3 decades working nights and smoking too many cigarettes and arguing with everyone in range. His eyes are dark brown and extremely alert and give the impression, consistently accurate, that he has already considered whatever you're about to say and is waiting to hear whether you say it correctly. He has been at the paper for 20 years. Before that he was at La Presse, and before that he was doing something in the provinces that he has never described to you in any detail. There is a story there. You have not asked. You have learned that Pelletier tells you what you need to know when you need to know it, and that asking for more before that point is the fastest way to spend an afternoon doing proofreading. He's standing at his window when you come in, which means he's been waiting, which is never a good sign. Pelletier sits when he is comfortable. He stands when he is thinking hard about something. The window behind him shows the same back courtyard, the same printing house wall, the same strip of sky, and he looks at none of it. He looks at the glass itself or at something past it. You saw the Figaro? Yes. The envelope. I brought it. He turns and holds out his hand. You give him the envelope. He opens it without hesitation and reads whatever is inside, and his face does the thing it does when he's absorbing important information, which is absolutely nothing. No reaction. Complete flatness. It's one of his gifts. He puts the note down on his desk and looks at you. Sit down, Edouard. 3 weeks ago he told you about the story. Not the whole story. He never tells you the whole story in one sitting. He gives it to you in pieces, the way you give medicine to a difficult patient in doses you can absorb without flinching. 3 weeks ago, the first dose. There are establishments in Paris. Not official establishments, not licensed, not any kind of legal category that exists, where men can purchase the company of other men. Not just company, he said, using the word in the way Parisian journalists use words, which is technically precise and practically unambiguous. Not just company. You understand. You understood. He watched your face when he said it, and you worked very hard to keep your face calm, and you succeeded mostly. These establishments, he said, are not new. They've existed in Paris, in all the great cities, for longer than anyone cares to formally acknowledge. What is new, what has changed in the past year is 2 things. 1. The quantity. The Exposition has brought to Paris an extraordinary concentration of men with money and discretion and needs, and the city's entrepreneurial instincts have responded accordingly. 2. The clientele. Not the usual clientele. The petits employés, the working men, the artists from Montmartre who float through every kind of experience with their notebooks, but men of significance, politicians, industrialists, men of the professional classes, men who have wives and children and positions and reputations that are, in the language of 1889, worth protecting. And one of those men, Pelletier paused here, looking at you with those unreadable brown eyes, one of those men is the subject of the note that arrived this morning. The man who resigned from the commission, you say. His name is Forestier, Anatole Forestier. He's a deputy from the Gironde. Pelletier allows himself a brief pause that has nothing to do with hesitation and everything to do with timing. He was also, until the evening of last Tuesday, a regular client of an establishment on the Rue Sainte-Anne. The Rue Sainte-Anne, you know it. You have walked it. A narrow street in the 2nd arrondissement, not far from the Palais Royal, running between the large boulevards in a way that makes it feel more private than it is. Commercial buildings, a few restaurants, nothing that announces itself. The establishment, Pelletier says, is called, among those who know it, the Maison Renard. It has operated, under one name or another, for at least 4 years. The police know about it. Several people at the prefecture know about it. Its owner has certain understandings in place that have allowed it to operate without interference. Until now. Pelletier picks up the note again, looks at it. Until someone in the prefecture decided that those understandings were no longer advantageous, or until someone provided the prefecture with a reason to reconsider. You think about this. Who sent the note? I don't know. Yet. What does it say? Pelletier looks at you for a moment with the expression he uses when he's deciding how much to tell you. Then he hands you the note. It is short, handwritten, in the careful script of someone who doesn't write with their usual hand. 8 lines. It gives an address, not the Rue Sainte-Anne address you already know, a different one, on the Rue des Petits-Champs, and a time. 3 o'clock this afternoon. And a single sentence that is either extremely precise or extremely vague depending on what you already know. The man you're looking for will be there, and he will not be alone. You put the note on the desk. You want me to go, you say. I want you to look, Pelletier says. I want you to see who is there. I want you to remember everything. Everything, Edouard, not just the big things. And come back and tell me. And if something, nothing will happen to you. He says it with a certainty that you almost believe. You're a young man walking on a public street. Nobody cares about you. That is, in this context, your most valuable quality. You pick up the note again. The address on the Rue des Petits-Champs. You know the street. It is in the 1st arrondissement, just east of the Palais Royal, a street of small shops and apartments, unremarkable. 3 o'clock, that gives you the morning. Go through what we have, Pelletier says, settling into his chair in a way that means the conversation is largely over. The background material, all of it. You should know the territory before you walk into it. The territory. You go back to your table and open the drawer where Pelletier has been depositing in the past 3 weeks an accumulation of material that constitutes the background of the story. Press clippings, handwritten notes in Pelletier's illegible hand, several documents that you've not asked about because their origin seems best left unexamined. A pamphlet, privately printed, of the kind that circulates through certain Parisian channels and never appears on any newsstand. You begin to read. The story has a history that is longer and more complicated than any single scandal. It begins, in the practical sense, not with any particular establishment, but with the Penal Code of 1810, which Napoleon Bonaparte's legal experts assembled from various sources, among them the revolutionary idea that certain categories of consensual private behaviour between adults were not properly the business of the state. The code that resulted had no specific provision against relations between men. What it had instead were provisions against public indecency, Article 330, outrage public à la pudeur, and provisions against corruption of minors, and these two articles, plus a general provision about public order, were what the police used. You knew approximately this. What you did not know, or had not thought carefully about, is what it meant in practice. It meant that what happened in private between adults was, in theory, beyond the reach of the law. This was not an enlightenment, but a technicality. The police found ways around it constantly, and the social consequences of exposure were severe enough to make the legal technicality almost irrelevant. But it also meant that the commerce, the establishments, the places where money changed hands for services rendered, existed in a specific kind of legal ambiguity. They were not legal. They were also not precisely the same kind of illegal as the women's Maison de Tolérance, which were formally licensed and regulated and taxed and inspected, a system so thoroughly normalized that its own grotesquerie had become invisible. The men's establishments were different. They had no license because there was no category to license them. They existed in the space between not illegal and illegal, which in Paris in 1889 was a space that required active maintenance. Active, continuous, expensive maintenance. The police knew. The police tolerated. The police were paid to tolerate. The payment was not always money. Sometimes it was information. Sometimes it was certain kinds of access. Sometimes it was simply the ongoing goodwill of people who were connected to people who mattered. This system worked in the way that Paris's many informal systems worked until it didn't. You set down the clippings and pick up the pamphlet. It is printed on cheap paper, 12 pages, the prose simultaneously florid and clinical in the way of certain kinds of underground literature. But underneath the style there are specifics, addresses, not names. The names have been excised, replaced with initials and descriptions, but addresses and descriptions of the establishments and a picture of how the commerce worked that is detailed enough to be useful. The Maison Renard on the Rue Sainte-Anne occupies the upper floors of a building that at street level presents itself as a printer's shop. You enter through a door at the side of the building, up a staircase that is perfectly ordinary looking, and you arrive on the second floor in what presents itself as a private social club, a salon with comfortable furniture, drinks served by young men whose employment covers a range of services. The rates are established. The young men, the pamphlet uses a word, garçons de plaisir, which it applies without apparent emotion, range in age from perhaps 17 to 25. They are recruited from the pool of men in Paris who have discovered, through experience or by inclination, that the city will pay for certain things that their own natures lead them to offer. You think about this for a moment. You're 21 years old. You arrived in Paris with 47 francs. You've done nothing improper to survive, but you have done things you didn't expect to do. Helped Pelletier with research that requires going places and asking questions that a person with better established prospects would refuse to do. You have stood in alleys at night listening to conversations that weren't meant to be heard. You have presented yourself as things you aren't, a student, a businessman's secretary, twice a relative of someone, in order to get information. You are not the young man who left these establishments, but you understand something of the circumstances that make a person available for purposes that their original nature didn't specify. Paris is a very expensive city, that's all. You read until 11. Then you put everything away and go to find food. The street vendor on the Rue Montmartre sells sandwiches, jambon, fromage, rillettes, from a cart that has been in the same position, you're reasonably sure, since before you were born. The bread is this morning's, the ham is yesterday's, and the price is 8 centimes, which is the price of actual survival, the price at which the mathematics of staying alive in this city just barely adds up. You eat standing, leaning against the wall of the printing house next door, watching the street. The bread is slightly dry, and the ham is slightly too salty, and it is the best thing you've eaten today, and you will be hungry again by 2 o'clock, which is a fact of life you have stopped resenting. Paris at noon in summer. The heat has arrived since morning, the kind of heat that comes off the cobblestones and the stone facades and collects in the streets. The sun hitting the tops of the buildings and sliding down into the canyon of the Rue Montmartre. Women with their market baskets. Men in shirt sleeves in the workshops whose windows face the street. A cart horse standing with its head down, sweating, waiting with the philosophical patience of cart horses for something to happen or not happen. Its tail moves against the flies with the automatic rhythm of an engine idling. Somewhere behind you, in the building that houses, among other things, the offices of Le Lampion, Pelletier is reading 6 newspapers and making notes and building in his head the structure of a story that could, if handled correctly, end the political career of at least one man and seriously embarrass several others. You think about what that means, not the scandal itself. You have had 3 weeks to process the basic facts, and you have processed them with the particular efficiency that working for Pelletier requires, which is, here is information, analyze it, use it, do not become too attached to your reactions about it. That is the job. You're not sure you have entirely succeeded, but you have succeeded enough. What you think about now, eating your jambon sandwich in the noon heat, is what it means to be the person who goes to look, the witness, the nobody looks at twice. If the note is accurate, someone will be at an address on the Rue des Petits-Champs at 3 o'clock. Someone important. Someone who is there for reasons connected to the Maison Renard or its equivalent. And you will be there too, on the street, watching. And what you see will become the foundation of a story that will be printed and distributed to 8,000 subscribers and read by more. You throw the paper wrapping from your sandwich into the gutter, where it joins an impressive collection of previous wrappings and other material, and you walk back to the office. At 2 o'clock, you put your jacket on and tell Jules you'll be back by 5 and step out into the afternoon. The walk to the Rue des Petits-Champs takes 20 minutes at a normal pace. You take 30 because you want to arrive without appearing to have gone somewhere specific, and because you need to look at the street before you need to look at anything on it. The heat is at its worst in the early afternoon, and the shade on the narrow streets comes only where the buildings are tall enough to lean toward each other overhead. And in those shaded passages the air is cooler by 2 or 3 degrees, enough to notice, enough to make you angle your route through them when you can. The Rue des Petits-Champs, Street of the Small Fields. The name is 500 years out of date. There are no fields anywhere near here and haven't been since before anyone currently alive was born. It runs east-west through the first arrondissement, connecting the Avenue de l'Opéra with the Rue Vivienne, a quiet street that time has left roughly as it found it, narrower than the Haussmann boulevards, older, with buildings of varying heights and ages that give it the slightly irregular, slightly crowded feeling of a Paris that existed before the prefect arrived with his straight lines and his vision of modernity. You walk along it from the West End. Shops, a perfumery, Its window display a careful arrangement of bottles in the amber and pale gold that Parisian perfumers favour. The smell reaching through the doorway as you pass, something floral and heavy, something that costs more per bottle than you earn in a week. A small restaurant, its midday service winding down, the last customers visible through the glass over plates of something unidentifiable from the street. A tailor, an apartment building with the concierge visible behind her loge window, watching the street with the professional thoroughness of a woman who has been observing this particular piece of Paris for 30 years and knows every face that belongs in it and every face that doesn't. You are a face that doesn't belong here, but you are doing nothing to make this obvious. You are walking at an ordinary pace. You glance in shop windows. You look like a young man with somewhere to be who is not yet quite there. The address from the note is number 23, a 3-story building, residential, older than its neighbours, the stone facade darkened by decades of city soot, until it is the particular grey-black of old Parisian stone, a colour that is not ugly exactly, but is deeply specific to this city, the colour of time and coal, and the particular atmosphere of a place that has been burning things to stay warm for 800 years. There is a carriageway entrance, the wooden doors standing open. Above the entrance, the standard collection of Parisian apartment building information, 4 doorbells, 4 names on small cards in brass holders. You don't look directly at it. You walk past at the same pace. You take in what you can without turning your head. The carriageway leads to a courtyard. In the courtyard, visible through the gap of the open doors, there are 2 figures. A man, middle height, well dressed, and a boy who's either delivering something or being given something, the transaction unclear, the posture on both sides suggesting a conversation rather than commerce. You keep walking. At the end of the block, you stop in front of the tailor's window and look at the display. A jacket in deep blue, a pair of trousers, a waistcoat in patterned silk that seems excessive in July. And in the reflection of the glass, you watch the entrance of number 23. A man comes out, 40, 45, dressed in the dark broadcloth of a professional man, a lawyer or a civil servant or a deputy. He walks quickly, not running, but with the gait of someone who has finished something and wants to be elsewhere. He turns west, away from you. His footsteps are quick and even on the cobblestones, and he doesn't look back. You wait. Another man goes in. You can see him only from the back. Something about the set of his shoulders, the quality of his jacket, the slight hesitation before he steps through the carriageway. Something that suggests this is not his first time here, but is not something he has entirely normalized. The hesitation is barely a second. Then he goes through. You stand at the tailor's window for 11 minutes. You count 3 men entering number 23. 2 of them you can describe but not identify. The 3rd one you recognize. You recognize him because his photograph has been in every newspaper in France for the past 2 years. Because his name has been attached to 3 major pieces of legislation. Because 3 weeks ago Pelletier told you his name, and you have since looked at everything that has ever been printed about him. Deputy Anatole Forestier, from the Gironde. Not tall, but notable. The particular grey of his hair. The way he carries himself with the controlled precision of a man who is aware of being watched in all public contexts. The careful cut of his jacket, which is good but not ostentatious. The jacket of a man who understands that in the Republic of 1889 the appearance of moderation is a political asset. He goes into number 23 at 8 minutes past 3 and comes out at 26 minutes past. He doesn't look around when he comes out, which tells you something. A man who'd never done this would look around. A man who was doing it for the first time would be hyper-vigilant. A man who has done it before and still hasn't resolved the question of whether he wants to stop, that man walks quickly with his eyes forward, because looking around admits that there is something to look for. You follow him for 2 blocks and then stop. You have what you came for. You stand on the corner of Rue des Petits-Champs and Rue de la Banque and let the city move around you and think about Anatole Forestier, deputy from the Gironde, who has a wife and 2 children in Bordeaux. You know this, you have read the clippings, and who just spent 18 minutes at number 23 on the Rue des Petits-Champs. You feel several things simultaneously. The clean, precise satisfaction of having done what you came to do, of having confirmed what Pelletier suspected, and underneath that something less comfortable, a kind of unease that you don't entirely have words for yet, something about watching a man walk into a building and out of it, and knowing that what happened inside, whatever it was, is going to be printed, is going to be read, is going to become the event that organizes this man's life from this moment forward, the thing he was when he was something else, the secret that was private and will be public. He's from the Gironde. That's your department. Bordeaux is in the Gironde. His constituents voted for him. They read Le Lampion or papers like it. They will read the story. You start walking back to the office. This is Paris in 1889. This is what the city asks of you. You either do it or you find another job. And you don't have 47 francs anymore. You have 17. And the room on the Rue des Martyrs costs 24 francs a month. That is the arithmetic. The thing about Paris that nobody in Bordeaux told you, and that you've had to learn by living in it, is that the city operates at every level simultaneously. The gutter and the Grand Salon are not separate. They are adjacent. They are connected by passages and alleys, and the 1,000 informal arrangements by which a city of 3 million people conducts its actual life, as opposed to its official one. You see this on the walk back. The Palais Royal is 300 meters from the Rue des Petits-Champs. You walk through its gardens, taking the slightly longer route, because the Palais Royal gardens are the kind of place that puts Paris in perspective, the kind of place where you can feel both the history and the present moment simultaneously. The Palais Royal, built for Richelieu, passed to the Orléans family, redesigned in the 1780s when the Duc d'Orléans needed money, and turned the garden arcades into shops and theatres and restaurants, and, famously, notoriously, into a kind of free zone for everything that Paris officially prohibited and unofficially required. Gambling, prostitution, political agitation, revolutionary pamphlets, the whole catalogue of human appetite, conducted openly in the arcades of a building owned by the cousin of the king, who could not send his police in without the Duke's permission. It was here, in the summer of 1789, that Camille Desmoulins climbed on a café table and told the crowd that the troops were surrounding the city and it was time to act. 3 days later, the Bastille fell. Revolution and pleasure. In Paris, they are more connected than people like to admit. The gambling has been shut down for decades, a law of 1838, which the gambling houses immediately found ways around, moving their operations into apartments and private clubs. The prostitution has been regulated. The pamphlets have been replaced by newspapers, which is progress of a kind. But the gardens are still here. The arcades are still here. The fruit sellers, the book dealers, the café tables set under the vaulted arches where the afternoon light comes in at angles and turns the stone a warm gold, pigeons in the gravel paths, a child chasing them, an old man reading on a bench with the absorbed concentration of a man who has found the one place in Paris where the noise is manageable, and the particular energy of the place, the sense of something available, something illicit made almost respectable by the grandeur of the setting. That is still here too. You feel it as you walk through, that very slight heightening of attention, the sense that the Palais Royal has always been aware of what it is and what it permits, and that this awareness is woven into the stone itself. You walk through and come out the other side and make your way back to the office. Pelletier is waiting. He is not a man who paces, but he is standing again, which is the same signal. The evening light through the window behind him puts his face in partial shadow, the brown eyes darker than usual. You tell him what you saw. All of it. The men entering, the timing, Forestier. You tell it in the order you experienced it, because Pelletier has said more than once that the order of experience matters, that the sequence of what you noticed and when you noticed it is part of the information. He listens without moving, without interrupting, without writing anything down. When you finish, he's quiet for a moment. The building on the Rue des Petits-Champs, he says, not the original address. The note said, I know what the note said. I'm telling you what it means. Someone has moved the operation or part of it, or created a secondary location. The Maison Renard on the Rue Sainte-Anne is the known address. This is something new. He turns toward the window. Someone wants us to know about the new address. Someone who already knew about the original. You wait. There's a name, Pelletier says finally, that keeps appearing in the background material, a man named Vidal, Henri Vidal. He's an inspector attached to the 3rd Brigade, the Moor, the Vice Squad. He's been assigned to these establishments for 2 years. He knows everything that happens in them. Another pause. He has also, according to one of my sources, been expanding his private income in ways that are connected to what he knows. Blackmail. The word sits between you like an object placed on a table. You think Vidal is the source, you say. I think Vidal has been extracting money from the clients of the Maison Renard for some time, and I think something has changed in that arrangement, and I think the note is Vidal's way of applying pressure through a third party, through us, when direct pressure has stopped being sufficient. You think about Forestier walking out of the building on the Rue des Petits-Champs, the controlled precision of a man who has made a decision he hasn't finished making. What does he want, you ask? Vidal. That, Pelletier says, is what I need to find out before I can decide what to do with the rest of it. He sits down, finally, which means the stand-in and thinking part is over, and the planning part is beginning. Tomorrow, he says, go to the Rue Sainte-Anne, just walk past, get a sense of the building. Don't go in. Don't do anything that requires you to be remembered. And then we'll see what Vidal does next. That night you lie in the narrow bed in the Chambre de Bonne and listen to the city and think. What you think about is not Forestier. You've managed to separate Forestier from the question of what will happen to him, in the way that you have managed to separate all the subjects of all the stories you've helped Pelletier with from the question of what happens to them afterward. It is a necessary skill. You are developing it. What you think about is the building itself, the building on the Rue des Petits-Champs, and the building on the Rue Sainte-Anne that you haven't yet seen, and the city that contains both of them within its ordinary texture, its commerce, and its apartments, and its streets, without any outward sign that anything unusual is happening there. You think about what it means for something to exist, and not exist simultaneously, to be present in the city, real, physical, with an address and a building and people who enter and leave it, but to occupy no official category, to appear on no register, to exist only in the knowledge of certain people and the willful ignorance of others. Paris is full of such things. The city runs on a kind of collective agreement about what is acknowledged and what is not. The Maison de Tolerance for women. There are several hundred registered, several more unregistered, exist, are regulated, are inspected by doctors, are present on official maps maintained by the prefecture. Their existence is an embarrassment and a utility simultaneously, and the city handles this by filing the embarrassment in a drawer and using the utility. The establishments for men exist in the space below the drawer, below acknowledgement, below the level at which the city can file them away as a managed problem. This means they are more vulnerable, not less present, more vulnerable. The managing of women's prostitution is a system. The management of men's is improvised, individual, dependent on personal arrangements that can be ended by any single party without notice. The pamphlet said the Penal Code of 1810, 79 years ago, 3 generations of men in Paris, in all French cities, navigating the gap between what exists and what is permitted, what is needed and what is named. 3 generations of arrangements made and broken and remade, of money paid and information exchanged and secrets held until they were worth more as weapons than as secrets. This is not new. This is as old as the city. What is new is the Exposition. What is new is 3 million visitors, and a concentration of wealth and discretion, and the specific kind of loneliness that accumulates in men who live at the apex of the Third Republic, who perform their public lives with absolute precision and have almost nowhere to put everything else. The night traffic on the Rue des Martyrs, the distant bells of Saint-Vincent-de-Paul, the woman's cough through the wall, regular now, almost rhythmic, a sound you've stopped finding disturbing because you've heard it every night for 8 months, and something in you has incorporated it into the background of your life. You close your eyes. Tomorrow is another day. The next 2 days are spent in the ordinary work of the newspaper, which continues regardless of the story, because the newspaper is not only the story, and the story is not yet printable. Pelletier works on 3 other pieces: a municipal finance question, a review of a play at the Comédie Française, a political analysis of the upcoming elections. You proofread and verify and copy and do the dozen other things that keeping a small newspaper alive requires. Your pen moves across the proof pages, leaving small corrections. A transposed letter here, a misplaced comma there. The invisible work that nobody reads, but that makes the difference between a paper that looks professional and one that doesn't. Jules sets the corrected type with the same methodical efficiency, never commenting on the corrections, never asking why. But in the background, always in the background, the story. Tuesday morning you do what Pelletier told you to do 2 days ago and walk down the Rue Sainte-Anne. It is an unremarkable street. That is its first and most important quality. It does not look like anything. It runs for perhaps 400 metres between 2 larger streets, mostly residential in character, with a few commercial premises at the northern end. The buildings are old, built before Haussmann, most of them, with a particular slight irregularity of old Parisian construction. The story is not quite aligning, the facades not quite plumb, the street itself slightly curved in a way that you can see if you stand at one end and look down it. A curve too gentle to be called a bend, but present. The remnant of some older logic of the city that the straight lines of the new Paris never quite absorbed. Number 14 is the printer's shop. You walk past it without slowing. The shop is open. You can see through the window, two men setting type, the smell of ink reaching the street even through the closed lower half of the door. That particular smell that is both metallic and organic, the smell of lead and solvent and the dried residue of 100 previous print runs. The carriageway beside it is closed. The side door in the carriageway is not visible from the street. You walk to the end of the block, cross to the other side, and walk back. There is nothing visible that says anything about the upper floors, nothing visible at all. The building looks exactly like what it partly is, a commercial property with residential above. The shutters on the upper windows are closed against the morning sun, which is now past its worst but still strong enough to make the south-facing windows of the street unbearably hot. Behind those shutters, whatever is there, furniture, rooms, the specific arrangement of a place that is not on any official list and does not appear on any map, is completely invisible from outside. This, you understand, is not accidental. The invisibility is the point. The invisibility is the entire value proposition of the thing. A woman comes out of the carriageway, 40, perhaps 45, dressed in good dark wool, a hat that is practical rather than decorative, the kind of hat a woman wears when she's going somewhere to do something rather than going somewhere to be seen. She walks north without looking at anything in particular. Her posture is straight and her step is quick, and she has the general air of a person managing several things. It might be Lucy, it might be any woman managing several things. Paris is full of women managing several things. You keep walking. On Wednesday evening, you go for the first time to see the Eiffel Tower. You have been in Paris since November. The tower was open to visitors in March. Everyone goes to the tower. The tower is the tower. It is the single thing that everyone who visits Paris in 1889 talks about. The reason the exposition exists in the minds of many of its visitors, the defining image of a year that is supposed to represent progress and modernity and the triumph of French engineering. You have not gone because it costs money. 1 franc 50 for the first stage, 3 francs for the second, 5 francs for the top. The top is out of the question. But the first stage, 1 franc 50. That is 2 days of bread, and for 2 months it seemed like too much. And then, this week, with the story pressing against your consciousness the way a wound presses, with the feeling of having stepped into something that is larger than you understood, you decide that you need to see the city from above, not for any practical reason, for a different kind of reason. The kind that doesn't fit neatly into the arithmetic of survival. You go on Wednesday evening after the office closes. You take the omnibus to the Champ de Mars. The omnibus is crowded. It is always crowded in summer with the exposition visitors, the tourists in their distinctive clothes from a dozen countries, their faces carrying the particular expression of people who have travelled a long way to be amazed and are determined to be. You stand between a German man and his wife, the man holding a guidebook that he has been consulting since at least the boulevards Italiens, his wife looking out the window at Paris with an expression of concentrated pleasure. 1 franc 50. The tower. You have seen it from a distance many times. From the hill of Montmartre it is visible as a dark ironwork presence, a geometric silhouette against whatever the sky is doing. From the bridges it stands downstream, the latticed legs planted wide, the thing rising from them in stages, first the broad first level with its 4 arched entrances, then the tapering second level, then the impossibly thin final section, climbing to the viewing platform at 300 metres. From directly below it is something else entirely. You stand at the base of one of the legs and look straight up through the lattice of the ironwork. The geometry of crossed metal rises toward a point 300 meters above you, the sky visible through it in pieces, the structure too large to see all at once, requiring you to track up and up and up. The scale is different here than it is from a distance. From a distance, the tower is a shape, an outline. From here, it is a fact, a physical reality. 18,000 iron pieces, each machined in Eiffel's workshops in Levallois-Perret, and transported to the site and lifted into position by cranes that were themselves remarkable pieces of engineering. You can see the individual rivets. You can see the slight patina of 3 months of weather already beginning on the painted iron. You can smell the iron itself, cold and faintly metallic even in July. The queue for the first stage elevator is long. You wait for 30 minutes, which in Paris is 20 minutes longer than patience usually lasts, but which tonight you find perfectly acceptable. You stand in the queue and listen to the languages around you: English, German, Italian, American English, which is different from the other English in ways you're starting to notice: a broader vowel, a certain directness of emphasis. And watch the people who've just come down from the first stage and are working out how to explain what they've just seen to people who haven't been up yet. The elevator, an iron cage, uncomfortable, creaking, rising at a pace that makes the stomach register the ascent before the eyes have registered the changed altitude. The sounds change as you go up, the noise of the ground level receding, replaced by the sound of wind and the slightly different quality of the air at 100 meters, and then the first stage, 115 meters above the Champs de Mars, above Paris. The city spreads below you like a map, but that metaphor is insufficient because a map is flat, and this is not flat. This is three-dimensional. This is the city as volume, as depth, as the sum of 1,000,000 heights and structures and spaces. The Seine is a silver curve through the middle of it, carrying the light differently than the surrounding buildings, moving, alive. The buildings press against each other in their varying heights, the streets as channels between them, the parks as green lungs, the grand boulevards as formal gestures of rationality imposed on what would otherwise be chaos. You can see the dome of the Pantheon, the towers of Notre Dame, the gold dome of the Invalides, the long straight line of the Champs-Élysées leading to the Arc de Triomphe, the white bulk of the new Sacré-Cœur under construction on the hill of Montmartre, not finished yet, still shrouded in scaffolding, but present, rising, its profile already distinct against the sky, and beyond the formal centre, the arrondissements spreading outward, the workshops and the factories and the tenements and the markets and the alleys and the courtyards and the 1,000,000 daily lives stacked on top of each other in a density that from this height looks almost like beauty, and from street level is sometimes almost unbearable. You can see the smoke from the factories in the east. You can see, in the west, the green of the Bois de Boulogne, the wealthy family's park, the place where on Sunday mornings you can watch people who own things moving among trees. You can see the second arrondissement from here, or you think you can, the blocks of buildings, the streets. You cannot pick out the Rue Montmartre or the office of Le Lampion or the Rue Sainte-Anne. The scale makes everything both more and less specific. You can see the streets but not the people on them. You can see the city but not what happens in it. You think about Forestier, about the 18 minutes at the Rue des Petits-Champs, about the list that Pelletier said exists somewhere, maintained by someone, the written record of what cannot be officially recorded. From here, none of it is visible. From here, Paris looks like what it tells itself it is. The most beautiful city in the world, the city of light, the city of the century. 3 million people live in the achievement of civilization. From the streets, it is all of that, and also something else, something that has always been there and has never been admitted. The city below the city, the arrangements under the arrangements, the human needs that persist regardless of whether they are acknowledged or regulated or condemned. The tower was designed by Gustave Eiffel and built by 300 metal workers in 2 years and 2 months. It was almost certainly visited by some of the men on the list that Vidal is building. This city contains everything. You stay on the first stage for half an hour until the light begins to fail, and the city below starts its transformation into the nighttime version. The gas lights coming on, the shadows deepening, the sound of the city changing from the daytime roar into the evening's more complicated music. Then you go down. Thursday, the Café Voltaire near the Odéon. You arrive at 7:15, 45 minutes before the meeting Bernard mentioned, and take a table in the back section near the wall where you have a view of the entrance and most of the room, and where you're unlikely to be directly noticed. The marble tabletop is cool under your forearms. The wall behind you is painted dark red, which is slightly different in the corner where it has been repainted at some point, and the match was close but not exact. You order a glass of wine, which you will nurse for as long as necessary. You have your notebook in your jacket pocket, but you don't take it out. The Café Voltaire is a political café. This is immediately obvious from the frame portraits on the walls, not the usual collection of famous actresses and racehorses, but thinkers, writers, figures of the Republic. Voltaire himself, naturally, the pointed face with its particular expression that manages to be simultaneously amused and contemptuous. Also Rousseau. Also, in the far corner, a somewhat surprising portrait of someone who might be Bakunin, though you can't read the small plaque from here. The clientele is mixed in that particular Parisian way that means educated people of varying incomes sitting near each other without necessarily speaking. At 7:55, a man comes in and takes a table 3 away from yours. He is perhaps 50, well dressed, with the manner of someone who has been somewhere important long enough to wear importance as a second skin. He orders coffee without looking at the menu, the order of someone who knows what they want and doesn't need to consider it. He looks at the door. A woman comes in at 8:02. It is the woman from the Rue Sainte-Anne. The dark wool, the practical hat, the straight posture. She sits across from the man, and they greet each other with the brief restraint of people who have met before and are not happy to be meeting now. Something in the economy of the greeting, the minimal movement, the absence of social warmth, says this is business of the kind where warmth is not useful. You look at your wine and listen. The cafe is noisy enough that their conversation is not audible from 3 tables away, which is frustrating, and also you realise why they've chosen this cafe. The noise provides cover without requiring them to meet somewhere private, which would be both more conspicuous and more dangerous. You watch instead of listening. The woman, Lucy, you're almost certain this is Lucy because is doing most of the talking. Her posture is controlled, but there is something underneath it that is not controlled. Her hands on the table are still, but still with the particular stillness of someone who has decided to be still as an act of discipline. The stillness is costing her something. You can see it in the slight tension around her jaw. The man is less controlled. Twice he moves his hands in a gesture that might be dismissal or might be despair. The hands rising and falling on the marble table with a softness that suggests defeat rather than conviction. Once he looks away, toward the door. with the expression of someone calculating distances. A third person arrives at 8:20, younger, 30 perhaps. Dark jacket, no hat, hair slightly damp as though he came quickly and hasn't been outside long enough to dry. He sits at the table and leans in, and the conversation changes, becomes more three-sided, more urgent, the gestures sharper. The man from the dark jacket speaks with the direct brevity of someone who doesn't have time for anything but the point. You try to lip read. You cannot. But you can see the moment when the conversation arrives at whatever conclusion they're here to reach, because Lucy sits back slightly and her hands unfold on the table and then fold again, a small private gesture that is different from the controlled stillness she's been performing. It is the gesture of someone putting something down, laying something down, a weight. The man across from her says something, definitive, one sentence. The younger man nods once. Lucy doesn't nod. She looks at the table and then looks up, and her expression is one that you recognise from your time with Pelletier watching people in difficult situations. It is the expression of someone who has decided to do something they don't want to do, because the alternatives are worse. That is an exact and specific expression, and you've seen it before, and you know what it means, and you know that whatever she has agreed to is not a small thing. The meeting lasts 35 minutes total. Then Lucy leaves first, alone. The younger man leaves next by the side exit, moving through the cafe with the practiced non-presence of someone who has learned to be unremarkable. The older man stays and orders another coffee and reads a newspaper that he takes from his jacket pocket. The movement deliberate, demonstrative, someone establishing that they have always only been here for the coffee and the reading. You finish your wine and leave. On the street outside, the Rue de l'Odéon in the evening heat, you stand for a moment and let the situation settle into your understanding. You don't know what they decided. You have no specifics, but you have seen the shape of it. 3 people connected to an establishment that is under pressure, meeting to resolve something, reaching a decision that at least one of them doesn't want to be making. And you have seen Lucy's face, that expression, the look of someone doing something they don't want to do. In your experience, brief and limited but not irrelevant, that expression accompanies one of 2 decisions. Either they're going to give Vidal what he wants and pay whatever it costs, or they're going to do something that removes Vidal from the situation entirely. You go back to the office and tell Pelletier everything. He listens. He's silent for longer than usual this time. Lucy, he says finally. She's the centre of the operational side. The other man, the older one, is the money, the financing behind the establishment. You know him? Pelletier looks at you with the expression he uses when he's decided what to tell you and what not to tell you. I have a theory, he says. The younger man is more interesting to me. The description, dark jacket, came quickly, damp hair. That might be someone I've been hearing about from another direction. A former gendarme named Rousseau, who left the force 3 years ago and has been working since then in what I'll call private security. Private security. People with sensitive situations hire people who understand sensitive situations to help manage them. Pelletier looks at his window again. If Rousseau is involved, then Lucy has engaged a professional. Not just a response to Vidal, a solution. The word solution hangs in the air between you. It is the kind of word that means many things depending on what precedes it, and right now it precedes several possible things, none of which are entirely comfortable. I need to find Vidal, Pelletier says, before Thursday becomes whatever Thursday's going to become. This is the part of the story that surprises you. In your understanding of how journalism works, the understanding you arrived with from Bordeaux, assembled from reading newspapers and imagining what the people who made them actually did, the journalist found the story and printed it. He didn't involve himself in the events of the story, he observed. But Pelletier's journalism is not observation, or not only observation. It is sometimes, at the critical moment, participation, the moment when he becomes part of the event by the act of contacting someone, of presenting himself as a person with information and the power to use it, of making himself a variable in the situation he's reporting. You understand this now. You're not sure yet how you feel about it. You have been thinking about this in the Chambre de Bonne, in the late hours after the ordinary sounds of the building have subsided, and there's only the night sounds of the city outside. What you're doing when you watch a man walk into a building, what you owe to the story and what you owe to the people in it. Where do I find Vidal, you ask? He drinks at a bar near the prefecture on the Ile de la Cité, the Bar Saint-Louis, every evening between 5 and 7. Pelletier reaches into his drawer and pulls out a photograph, a carte de visite, the small studio photograph that everyone has taken, the kind that circulates and is exchanged. A man in the formal portrait pose, 40, a slightly too wide face, the careful expression of official respectability. That's him, taken 2 years ago, so allow for time. You take the photograph. The man in it looks directly into the camera with the composed neutrality of someone who has decided what their face does in formal situations. The eyes slightly flat, the mouth set. The expression of a man who has learned to reveal nothing. What do I do if I find him? Nothing. You look at him. You see what he looks like when he's not on duty. And then you come back and tell me, and we'll plan the next step together. You nod. Edouard. You look up. You've done well on this story. Better than I expected when we started. He says this without warmth, which is how Pelletier says everything, but you hear it anyway. The step we're approaching, it's the difficult one. Once we contact Vidal directly, we're no longer just watching. We're part of what happens. He looks at you steadily. You should be clear in your own mind about what you want that to mean. You think about Bernard's friend from Rouen, the notice in the papers, the description of the cause as nervous illness. I'm clear, you say. Friday morning, the Ile de la Cité. You take the omnibus across the river, the first time you've been south of the Seine in 2 weeks. The crossing is brief. The bridges are never long, the river here narrower than it looks from the banks, but the change is perceptible. The air is different on the island, cooler, carrying the smell of the river on both sides, the particular smell of the Seine in summer, which is not clean but is distinctive, the smell of 2,000 years of city living in a river. The Ile is the original Paris, the island in the river where the Parisians first settled, the island that contains Notre Dame and the Sainte-Chapelle, and the Prefecture of Police, and the Palais de Justice, and the Conciergerie where Marie Antoinette spent her last weeks waiting for the machine that ended her. It is the oldest inhabited part of the city, and it has the feeling of being at the centre of something, the stones underfoot having absorbed centuries of Parisian history in a way that the newer arrondissements haven't quite achieved. The Bar Saint-Louis is a small establishment behind the prefecture, a working men's bar that caters primarily to the various categories of people who work in the justice and police complex nearby. The smell when you push open the door, wine and pipe smoke and the sawdust on the floor that absorbs the worst of what bars accumulate over a day. The faint dampness under the sawdust suggesting the floor has been wet and dried and wet again many times. The light is low. Gas lamps on the walls. the flame turned down in the afternoon heat, the room managing between the warmth of the bodies and the heat of the city outside. You arrive at 5:30 and take a stool at the end of the bar, order a beer and settle in. The stool is slightly unsteady. One leg is shorter than the others and rocks slightly when you shift your weight, a small constant instability that keeps you slightly alert, which may not be the worst thing. The bar fills steadily between 5 and 6. Men in the dark clothes of court officers, men in civilian clothes who have the particular bearing of plainclothes police, the way they hold themselves slightly apart from the room even when they're inside it, the way they sit with their backs to the wall if they can, the way their eyes move over the room when they come in with a professional thoroughness that is automatic by now, so ingrained it has stopped looking deliberate. At 6:10, Vidal comes in. He is recognizable from the photograph, though Pelletier was right to note the time. 2 years has changed him slightly. More grey at the temples, more weight in the face, a quality of satisfaction that wasn't there in the portrait's formal neutrality. The satisfaction is the thing you notice most. It sits in him the way contentment sits in a man who has arranged his life to his liking, a physical ease, a settledness, the body language of a person who has not been recently anxious about his position. He sits at the bar 4 stools from you and orders without looking at the menu, the order of a man who does this every day, the glass set in front of him by the bartender with the small efficiency of a transaction that requires no words. He exchanges a few words with the bartender, comfortable, expansive, the words of a man among his people. He looks at the door when another man comes in. The quick professional assessment, the classification of known and unknown, the relaxation when the new arrival is known. He knows this bar. He knows these people. He is comfortable here in the way that comes from having a position that has been stable for years, from having arrangements in place that he believes to be solid. You think about Lucy's face, the decision in it. You drink your beer slowly. At 7, you put your money on the bar and leave. The next morning, Saturday, Pelletier is not in the office when you arrive. He arrives at 10 looking like a man who has been somewhere and has come back with information that has changed the shape of the story. Something in his face is different. Not excited. Pelletier does not do excited, but different. The flatness is still there, but underneath it there is something that might be the specific alertness of a person who has made a move. He sits down without taking his jacket off, which he never does, and looks at you. I spoke to Vidal last night, after you left the bar. You stare at him. I know. I told you we would plan the next step together. I changed my mind. He doesn't apologize. Pelletier doesn't apologize as a rule. I had information that suggested the situation was moving faster than expected. I made a judgment. What did you tell him? That I knew about his arrangements, that I had a young man who could describe those arrangements in some detail, that I was prepared to print a story about his conduct, not about the maison, not about the clients, specifically about his conduct as a police officer using his official position for extortion, the bar on the Ile de la Cité, the solid satisfaction on Vidal's face, the security of a man whose arrangements have been stable for years. What did he say? Pelletier's quiet for a moment. He was surprised, then he was angry, then he was calculating. Pelletier uses the word with precision, meaning it exactly. He started asking what I wanted, what the price was. He pauses. Vidal thinks everyone operates the way he does. He assumed I was there to make a deal. Are you? Pelletier looks at you with something that might be in a different man, in a warmer man, something close to respect. No, I'm there to establish what he will do when he knows we're watching, what his next move is. He takes his jacket off finally and hangs it on the back of his chair. His next move, I believe, will be to accelerate, to move faster than he believes I can. If he thinks we're close to printing, he'll either approach his primary targets, the politicians, the deputies, with increased pressure, or he'll move to sell the complete dossier to whoever is buying. Either way, people get hurt. Either way, the story becomes more urgent. You sit with this. There's something else you should know, Pelletier says. He opens his desk drawer and takes out a document, a single page, handwritten. This arrived this morning. I don't know who sent it. It's a list of names. He puts it on the desk facing you. You look at it. 7 names, handwritten in the same careful non-handwriting as the original note. 7 names, and next to each name, a date or dates, and a brief notation. The first name is Anatole Forestier. The dates are spread across 6 months, the most recent a week ago. The notation is brief. Rue Sainte-Anne, also Rue des Petits-Champs. The other 6 names include 3 that you recognise: a senior civil servant at the Ministry of Finance, a man who's on the board of the main railway company, a deputy from a northern department whose name has been in the papers this week in the context of the upcoming elections. You put the document down. This is the dossier, you say. Part of it. Someone has sent us part of it. Pelletier looks at the document. The question is whether this is Vidal trying to demonstrate his power. Look what I have. Look what I can give you. Or whether it's from inside the maison. Someone moving against Vidal. You think about the Café Voltaire. Lucy's face. It's from inside the maison, you say. Pelletier looks at you. The meeting Thursday. They decided to move against Vidal by giving his material to a newspaper, not to expose the clients, to expose Vidal. If the story runs as a police corruption story, Vidal loses his position, loses his leverage, and the clients. You think about this. The clients are collateral damage, or some of them are. Or, Pelletier says slowly, someone at the Maison has decided that the best way to protect certain clients is to sacrifice others. Give us names, these names, and keep other names off the list. The list. 7 names, not all the names. You look at it again. The absence of certain names can be a statement as deliberate as the presence of others. We need to understand what we're being used for, you say. It comes out more directly than you intended, more like something Pelletier would say, and you see from his expression that he hears it. Yes, he says, we do. The story is not simple. You have spent 3 weeks thinking it was about one man's secret, and you now understand it is about a system of concealment and extortion, and competing interests, in which the persons with the most to lose are not the same as the persons who will suffer most from exposure, and in which the newspaper, which thinks of itself as outside the system, as the observer of the system, is in fact inside it, being used by parties who understand its power and are shaping what it will do. This is the thing they don't teach you in Bordeaux. This is the thing that Paris teaches you if you survive long enough to learn it. You pick up the list again and look at the names and think about what it means to print them. Forestier, a wife in Bordeaux, 2 children, a political career, whatever he is, whatever brought him to the Rue des Petits-Champs on a Tuesday afternoon, he is also those things, all of them at once. The young man from Rouen who hanged himself on a Tuesday in March was also many things at once, but he is not on any list now. You put the document down. What do we do, you ask? We think, Pelletier says, and we do some more research. The research takes 3 more days. They are the densest 3 days you have spent in Paris, denser than any day of carrying copy and proofreading, denser than the day you spent at the Exposition marvelling at the machinery, denser in a different way from the nights at the Père Labat with your coffee and your calculations. These 3 days are spent in a state of concentrated attention that is almost physically uncomfortable, like holding your head slightly above water, the effort of it constant and invisible. Pelletier sends you to the Public Records Office on Monday. You spend 4 hours there, working through the register of police citations and commendations for the 3rd Brigade, looking for Vidal's record. The reading room is high-ceilinged and cool, cooler than anything else in the 2nd arrondissement in July. The stone walls keeping the summer heat out with an efficiency that no wooden building can match. The registers are heavy, bound in brown leather, the pages slightly musty with the smell of years. Each page you turn leaves a faint residue of fine dust on your fingertips, the accumulated shedding of thousands of official records. You find what you're looking for in 2 of the volumes. Vidal has been cited twice for efficiency and once for outstanding initiative. He has also, 3 years ago, been the subject of an internal complaint, filed and then withdrawn, for conduct in the execution of his duties. The complaint is vague. It was withdrawn after 6 weeks. The official record shows no consequence. You make a note. The withdrawal after 6 weeks. The arrangement behind the withdrawal. The way a system that was supposed to constrain bad behaviour instead became the mechanism for legitimizing it. Tuesday you go back to the Rue des Petits-Champs, not to watch, to check. The address in the original note, number 23. You observe the building for an hour from various angles. Nothing unusual. But at 11 o'clock a man comes out of the carriageway who is not carrying anything, and has not apparently been delivering anything, and has the quick, purposeful walk of someone who has finished business and is not lingering. He wears a jacket that is good but deliberately plain, the jacket of a man who wants to be unremarkable and has given thought to how to achieve it. You follow him for a block. He goes south toward the Rue de Rivoli, hails a cab. Before the cab pulls away, he glances back, not directly at you, but in the general direction of the street. A scanning look, professional. The look of someone who checks whether they are followed in the same automatic way that you now check the condition of your boots every morning. He is not the man from the Café Voltaire, not Rousseau, but he has the same bearing, the same kind of professional caution. There are more people involved in this than you have names for. Tuesday evening you go to find Bernard. He is not at the hotel on the Rue Aubert where Pelletier told you he works. The concierge tells you, with the particular Parisian economy of information, that Bernard no longer works there. He was there last week. He is not there now. The concierge offers nothing else. In Paris, concierge give you what they've decided to give you and nothing beyond it. You go to 2 other places where Pelletier had suggested Bernard might be found. At both of them, you are told variations of the same thing. He was there. He is not there now. You go back to the office and tell Pelletier. Pelletier does not say anything for a long moment. He sits with his hands flat on the desk and looks at them with the expression of a man doing arithmetic in his head, the silent working out of what one absence means in the context of everything that is happening around it. Bernard left the establishment 3 months ago, he says finally. He came to us with information. He mentioned the Café Voltaire meeting to you. He was a source. He was a source who knew the inside of the operation, and now he's not where he should be. Pelletier looks up. That's a problem. You think about what kind of problem. Vidal, you say, or Lucie, or Rousseau, or someone else entirely. He looks at you. The question is whether Bernard left voluntarily or was removed. The word removed sits in the air like the word solution sat earlier, both of them carrying the same weight of what isn't said. If he was removed, you say carefully, then the situation has escalated. Yes. Then we're not just reporting on a scandal, we're in the middle of something that is still happening, Pelletier says. Yes, I know. He stands, goes to the window, the courtyard, the printing house, the strip of sky. This is why I told you on the first day that you needed to know what you were walking into, not as a warning, as a preparation. You sit with this. Do we print, you say, what we have? Not yet. What we have is suggestive. We need one thing that is concrete and verifiable. He turns around. And we need to know that Bernard is alive. Wednesday morning. Early. You're sitting in a café on the rue Sainte-Anne, 3 buildings down from number 14, at a table that is outside in the warming morning air, visible from the street. You have been here since 7:30. It is now nearly 9. You are not hiding. This is a deliberate choice. Pelletier's instruction was explicit. Don't hide. Be visible. Let the people who are watching the street know that you are there and that you have no apparent reason to conceal yourself. It is, he said, a more provocative act than hiding. It says, I know you're watching, and I have decided not to care. The street does its ordinary morning business. The printer's shop at number 14 opens at 8. 2 men go in. A delivery arrives. A handcart with paper stacked on it. The paper in thick wrapped bundles. The cartman straining slightly on the slight uphill of the street. The usual. The cafe around you has its usual Tuesday morning population. 2 men sharing a newspaper, each of them reading different sections with the practiced efficiency of a shared subscription. An older woman with a coffee and a look of permanent mild disapproval at whatever Paris is doing this morning. A young man in a student's jacket working at a notebook with the concentration of someone racing a deadline. The marble of the cafe table is warm already from the sun that has been on it since sunrise. Your coffee cup leaves a ring on the marble when you move it, the dark residue of the coffee making a mark that will dry and fade and leave almost no trace, the way most things leave almost no trace. At 9:30, a woman comes to the table. Not Lucy, younger, 25 perhaps, plain dress, good posture. She sits down without asking if she can and says, You're the person from Le Lampion. I work there, you say. Bernard sent me. You feel something release in your chest that you didn't realize was clenched. The release is physical, a loosening across the sternum, the shoulders dropping a fraction of a centimetre. He's safe? He's in Belleville. The outer district, the eastern edge of the city, working class, distant from the second arrondissement, and from the people who might have reason to look for him. He can't come to you. He asks whether you have what you need. Almost. Tell me something. The men in the establishment, the young men, are any of them being held there against their will? She looks at you. It is a clear, assessing look, the kind that doesn't flinch. No, they're paid. Some of them have debts to Lucy. Some of them would leave if they had other options. She pauses. The situation is not simple. Is anyone in danger? From Vidal. Vidal has been told, she says, that the situation has changed. That the people he has been pressuring have taken steps. Whether he accepts this. She pauses. He is not a man who accepts things easily. What steps? She looks at you with the expression that Bernard used. The careful calibration of what to give. The dossier, she says, the complete list, not the fragment that was sent to you. She puts her hands on the table. It has been sent somewhere else. Somewhere that Vidal will understand means the end of his leverage. If Vidal moves against anyone connected to the Maison or its clients, if anything happens to anyone, the list goes to the press. All of it. Every name. Including Vidal's superiors, who are also on it. You sit with this. Who received it? Someone at the Ministry of Justice. Someone senior enough to understand what it means. The ministry. The apparatus of the state, receiving its own secrets back from the people who hold them. The information looping back to its source, becoming a weapon in the hands of the people it was meant to destroy. Bernard says, the woman continues, that Vidal will be transferred, reassigned to a station outside Paris, within the week. The arrangements are already made. Quietly. Quietly. These things are always done quietly. You think about the list, the 7 names, Forestier and the others. The clients, you say, the men on the list. Some of them it'll be communicated to them that the situation is resolved, that the information is managed. She looks at her hands. Some of them have already left Paris. The Exposition provides excellent cover for departures. And the Maison itself? Will close. The building on the Rue Sainte-Anne has already been vacated. The business? A pause. The business will continue in some form. These things always do, but not at that address, not in the same way. The city, the arrangements under the arrangements. Why are you telling me this, you ask? She looks at you steadily. Because you need to know whether you're chasing a story that still exists, and because Bernard owes a debt to honesty, even when honesty is inconvenient. She stands. The story you have will not print as you intended. The man you intended to expose has been contained. The scandal you are building will not be the scandal you print. What will we print? She reaches into her bag and puts an envelope on the table. This, an account of Inspector Vidal's activities. Official complaint filed by 3 individuals, anonymized but legally real, with the Prefecture's Internal Affairs Division. This happened yesterday. It is not suppressed. It is real, and it will be acted on. She looks at you steadily. This is the story you can print without destroying people who've already suffered enough, and without being used. You pick up the envelope. She stands, smooths her skirt, and goes back into the Rue Sainte-Anne without looking back. You watch her until she turns the corner, and then she's just a figure in the crowd, indistinguishable from anyone else doing anything else on this ordinary Wednesday morning. You sit with the envelope for a long moment. The café around you, the 2 men with their newspaper, the woman with her disapproval, the student with his notebook. Paris going about its business on the Rue Sainte-Anne at 9:30 in the morning. Then you finish your coffee and go to find Pelletier. The conversation in Pelletier's office is the longest you've had with him. It takes 2 hours. He reads the complaint document. He asks you questions about the conversation. He sits with his hands flat on the desk and thinks in the way that he thinks, which is very still and very complete. The silence between his questions, not uncomfortable but purposeful. The silence of a man who is building something in his head. We could print more, he says at the end. We could. We have the names, we have the documentation. We do. He looks at you. But Bernard's friend from Rouen, you say? He's dead. He was collateral damage of this system, not the Maison itself, Vidal's exploitation of the system. If we expose the Maison and the clients, We make another set of people into collateral damage for what was done to him. You pause. And we're being given the choice of what to print. The choice is itself interesting, Pelletier says. Someone decided to give us that choice. Someone decided we could be trusted with it. Or that we could be managed with it. He nods. Or that. You look at the complaint document. The precise language of the legal complaint, the formal names of the provisions violated, the careful descriptions of conduct that are detailed enough to be actionable and general enough to protect the identities of the complainants. Vidal, you say, the police corruption angle, the extortion, the young man from Rouen, anonymized, the system that allows this to happen and the failure of oversight that let one inspector run it for 2 years. You think about the tower, the city from above, the shape of things. That's the story, not the scandal, the system. Pelletier looks at you for a long time. Yes, he says, that's the story. The story runs in Le Lampion 11 days later. A full front page and the second page. Pelletier's byline with the phrase enquête by our correspondent below it, which is the closest you will ever get to seeing your name in print in connection with this. It is about Inspector Henri Vidal of the 3rd Brigade of the Police des Murs. It is about his 2-year operation of using his official position to extract money from private individuals. It is about the complaint filed with Internal Affairs and the investigation that the prefecture has confirmed is underway. It is about the system of oversight that made this possible. It uses the phrase establishments of a particular character without being more specific than that. It does not name Forestier. It does not name the railway man or the Ministry of Finance official or the deputy from the north. It names Vidal and Vidal's superiors and the prefect himself, and asks why this was allowed to continue for 2 years. The story is reprinted in Le Figaro 3 days later, with a note attributing it to our colleagues at Le Lampion. This is the first time Le Figaro has ever acknowledged Le Lampion's existence. Pelletier reads this note sitting at his desk and does not change his expression. But later in the afternoon he calls you in and gives you a raise of 10 francs a month, which he communicates by putting coins on the desk in front of you without any comment whatsoever. You take it. 2 weeks after the story runs, Vidal is reassigned to a station in the Normandy countryside, a place called Pont-l'Évêque, 4 hours by train from Paris. The reassignment is described in the official notice as a routine administrative adjustment. Nobody prints anything about it. You read the notice in the daily police personnel listing, which you now read every morning along with the papers, because Pelletier has told you that the daily personnel listing tells you more about what is actually happening in the city than most of what appears on the front pages. Lucy closes the establishment on the Rue Sainte-Anne, and, according to what you hear later from sources you've developed, moves to Brussels, where similar arrangements are made for similar people in a city that has its own system of acknowledgements and silences. Lucy is practical. Lucy is always going to survive. The city taught her that. Anatole Forestier, deputy from the Gironde, remains in his seat. He votes on several pieces of legislation in the autumn session. His name appears in the Paris papers in connection with a speech he gives in October about agricultural policy. He is described in the commentary as a reliable and moderate voice in the centre. He is from Bordeaux. He knows the same streets you knew. He has probably walked past the same wine merchant your father argued with about unpaid debts. You don't know if he ever thinks about the Rue des Petits-Champs. You think about it sometimes, the 18 minutes, the controlled precision of a man who has made a decision he hasn't finished making. The summer passes. The exposition continues through October and then closes, and Paris begins the business of returning to itself after months of being visited. The tower stays. It was supposed to come down after the Exposition, but nobody orders it demolished, and eventually it simply becomes a permanent feature of the city, the way things that survive their initial controversy become permanent features of cities, because in the end Paris finds it easier to absorb something than to remove it. The artist who signed the petition stops signing petitions about the tower. Maupassant returns to Paris. The tower becomes, incrementally and then completely, Paris. On the 5th of October, the Moulin Rouge opens on the boulevard de Clichy at the foot of Montmartre, not 200 metres from the Rue des Martyrs. This is 200 metres from your building. The building is red and white with a giant decorative windmill on the roof, the sails of the mill turning with an elaborate mechanical system, the whole thing lit by the new electric lights in a way that makes it visible from a kilometre away on a clear night. The Moulin Rouge is a dance hall. It is many other things too, in the way that Paris's entertainment establishments are always many other things. But officially it is a dance hall, and the dance that it specialises in is the can-can, which is energetic and joyful, and involves the kicking of legs at heights that respectable opinion considers inappropriate. The clientele on opening night includes painters, bohemians, and a substantial number of the same kind of well-dressed bourgeois men you've seen going into various addresses in various arrondissements over the past several months. Paris does not change. Paris reorganises. You go to the Moulin Rouge on its second night. Not to report, just to go, which is a distinction you're learning to make more carefully. The price of entry is 1 franc, which is 2 days of bread but less than the first stage of the Eiffel Tower, and you've decided to allow yourself this. The interior is larger than the outside suggests. Electric lights strung from the ceiling, the brightness of it startling after the gaslit streets, the colours of the decorations more vivid than anything gas can achieve. The red's redder, the gold's more yellow, the whole room slightly unreal under the electric glare. The musicians in the corner playing with the competent enthusiasm of people who know their instrument and their job. The dancers on the floor moving in patterns that are formally chaotic. The can-can not quite breaking into full performance, but keeping that possibility alive at every moment. The skirts rising occasionally in demonstration. The noise is total. Conversation, music, laughter, the clatter of glasses and the scrape of chairs, and underneath it all the physical sound of many people in a small room, the collective warmth and breath and motion of it. You stand near the wall with your wine and watch Paris nightlife. The real thing, the undissimulated thing, not the quiet negotiations of the Rue des Petits-Champs, not the careful arrangements of the Maison Renard, but the open and unapologetic appetite for pleasure that is also Paris, that has always been Paris. That is probably the oldest part of what Paris is. A man near you, perhaps 40, well dressed in the way of a prosperous merchant rather than a politician, leans toward you and says over the noise, "First time?" "Second night," you say. He grins. He has the grin of someone who approves of what is happening around him without qualification. "It's going to be something, this place. You'll see. In 5 years, everyone in Europe will know it." You look around the room, the dancers, the electric lights, the absolute deliberate pleasure of it. "Yes," you say, "probably." He moves away into the crowd and you go back to watching. The autumn is beautiful. The way Parisian autumn is beautiful. The quality of light changing as September becomes October. The leaves in the Luxembourg gardens going gold and then brown and then falling in the gusts that come off the Seine. The air losing its July ferocity and becoming something more considered, more forgiving. You walk more. This is something you've started doing. The walking that is not for any specific purpose. Not going to the office, not following someone, not positioning yourself to observe. Walking because the city is always different when you walk it without intention, when you let it show you what it wants to show you rather than only what you're looking for. One evening in October you walk from the office all the way across the city to Montmartre, which is uphill all the way, the butte rising above the city with the particular stubbornness of high ground. The street steepening as you climb, your thighs feeling it by the time you reach the upper streets, and you stand at the top of the hill and watch the city go dark below you as the lights come on. The gas lamps first, their warm yellow, then the newer electric lights that are spreading in the wealthier arrondissements, the electric light whiter and more absolute, the illumination spreading outward from the centre like something alive, like the city itself is generating it. Somewhere in that darkness, the Rue des Petits-Champs, the Rue Sainte-Anne, the building now occupied by something else, some other business that has no history yet, or a history that hasn't been written. The Bar Saint-Louis on the Ile de la Cité, where Vidal no longer drinks. The Café Voltaire near the Odéon, where men who are not conspirators meet to drink coffee and talk about politics and literature and everything else that the city provides to discuss. Somewhere in that darkness, in Belleville, Bernard is doing whatever he's doing, building whatever comes next. Somewhere in that darkness, Forestier is probably at a dinner, or in his apartment, or at a session of some committee, being a deputy, being a moderate and reliable voice. The young man from Rouen is nowhere in that darkness. He is somewhere else entirely, if he is anywhere. You think about him more than you think about any of the others. This is not rational, probably. You didn't know him. You only knew about him from a conversation in a cafe with someone who knew him. He is one person among all the people the city has consumed, but he sits with you. He is the reason you've come to understand that you made the argument you made to Pelletier about which story to print. The argument that felt in the moment like a journalistic judgment and was actually something else, was actually the weight of knowing that information, weaponized, destroys the people who have the least to defend themselves with, and leaves standing the people who have the most. Vidal is reassigned but not imprisoned. Forestier is embarrassed but not named. The system that produced both of them is documented but not dismantled. This is how it goes. This is how it goes in cities, in this city, in all cities. But also, the story ran. People read it. The prefecture was named. The inspector was moved. The complaint was real, and the investigation was real, and something was, at minimum, documented. In the ledger of what journalism does, that is, you're not sure of the word, not enough, not nothing, something. The wind picks up on the hill, November coming, the cold edge of it already present in the October air, the first hint of the winter that will press the city down into itself and make the Chambre de Bonne-Brutal and the zinc bar of the Père Labarre the warmest place in your world. You turn away from the view and start downhill, the Rue des Martyrs, the familiar slope, the familiar smells. The boulangerie closed now, but the bread smell still faintly present in the doorway, the ghost of the morning's work, the fishmonger gone, the street quieter in the evening, but still present, still alive with the low-level urban life that doesn't stop because the hour has changed. A couple walking with the particular closeness of new love, a man with his coat buttoned against the October air, two women outside a doorway finishing a conversation that has been going on for a while. Père Labat is open. The light through the window is warm. You go in, order a coffee, stand at the zinc bar in the comfortable noise of the cafe in the evening. The zinc is cool under your elbows, the bar slightly tacky with the day's spillage that has been wiped but not eliminated. The smell of coffee and wine and pipe smoke and the particular smell of a cafe that's been full of people all day. The warmth and the human smell of it, which is not unpleasant and is, after a year, familiar in the way that the smell of your own building is familiar. The barman knows you. He puts the coffee in front of you without being asked, which is the Parisian cafe equivalent of being welcomed home. It is an insignificant gesture, and it means more to you than you would admit to anyone. You drink your coffee and read the end of the newspaper you've been carrying around all day, the back pages, the theatre notices and the racing results and the small advertisements, the daily minutiae of Parisian life. A notice for a concert at the Salle Pleyel, an advertisement for a wine merchant in the 8th, a notice that a bookshop on the Rue de Rivoli is closing, its stock to be sold. You put the paper down. Somewhere in the 2nd arrondissement, the offices of Le Lampion are empty for the night. Jules has locked up. The type has been set for tomorrow's edition, which is about a municipal budget question and a controversy at the Comédie Française and a parliamentary procedural matter that will interest perhaps 400 people and none of them very intensely. Ordinary journalism, the daily act of paying attention to the city's business and recording it and offering it to the people who care. You think you understand now why Pelletier does it. Not the scandals, not the occasional stories that change things or end careers, or document what the official record prefers to ignore. Those are real. Those matter. But also the ordinary things. The budget and the theatre and the parliamentary procedure and the daily documentation of what happened here, in this city on this day. The accumulation over time of the record. The sense that Paris is happening and has been happening and will continue to happen, and someone should be paying attention. You're 21 years old, and you've been in Paris for almost a year, and you've been learning in whatever ragged and imperfect way what it means to pay attention to a city. The coffee is finished. The bar is getting noisier. The evening crowd arriving from work, the workers who need somewhere to be between the job and the bed. You leave 10 centimes on the bar and step back out into the Rue des Martyrs. The hill, your building. The 6 flights of stairs in the dark. The wooden steps that creak in the same place every time. The particular hollow sound of the 4th step from the top that you have learned to avoid, stepping over it in the dark by muscle memory now, your body knowing the route the way your body knows nothing else in Paris. The door of the Chambre de Bonne, the cold room, the small window showing the courtyard, the narrow strip of sky with its October stars just visible through the smoke. You light the candle on the windowsill, the tallow smell, the small circle of warmth that extends perhaps 1 metre from the flame before the cold of the room reasserts itself. On the table, 3 pages of notes from yesterday, the beginning of a background piece Pelletier has asked you to write. Not a story exactly, more of a briefing document, the kind he uses to orient himself before approaching a larger subject. The subject is the system of police management of the city's social arrangements, what it allows and what it prohibits, and how the line between those things is drawn, and by whom and why. You sit at the table and look at the notes. Big question. Too big for one person, too big for one newspaper, too big for 1 year in Paris. But Pelletier said to start. Start with what you know, which is more than you knew in November. Start with the Rue Sainte-Anne and the Rue des Petits-Champs and the Café Voltaire and the bar on the Ile de la Cité and the complaint that runs to 4 pages and the 7 names that you did not print and the one that you will never know, the one from Rouen who deserved better from the city that took everything he had. You pick up your pen. The nib is slightly worn. It needs replacing, which will cost 3 centimes at the stationer's on the Rue Montmartre. You make a note of this in the margin of your working notes, the small practical accounting of the writer's life. Then you draw a line through the note and begin. Outside, Paris is doing what it does. The sounds of the street, the distant bells, from Saint-Vincent-de-Paul, the big church at the bottom of the Rue des Martyrs, its bells with that particular brass clarity that carries up the hill on still nights. 11 o'clock. The bells count out the hour with the patient precision of something that has been counting hours since before anyone currently alive was born, and will continue counting long after everyone currently alive is gone. The autumn of 1889, the year of the Tower, the year of the Exposition, the year 100 years of Republic was celebrated with machinery and electricity, and the tallest structure in the world, and 3 million visitors, and the Moulin Rouge, and the Rue Sainte-Anne, and the Rue des Petits-Champs, and everything else that happened simultaneously, in the same city, on the same streets, during the same beautiful and terrible summer. You write. The words come slowly at first, the way they always come when you're finding your way into something that is still too close to be seen whole. But the city helps. The city always helps. Paris outside the window, Paris with its noise and its smell, and its 10,000 simultaneous stories running in parallel. The city that has been doing this, living and dying and arranging itself into commerce and beauty and corruption, and occasionally something almost approaching justice, for 2,000 years. You write. The question is not what is permitted in Paris. The question is what is managed. You look at the sentence. You keep it. The candle burns down by increments. Outside, the sounds shift as the evening becomes the night. The cafes closing, the last carriages on the boulevard, the silence that is never quite silence, the city that runs through the night at a lower register, but never stops. Somewhere out there the Moulin Rouge is still lit, the electric lights blazing at the foot of the butte, the can-can still going, the pleasure continuing as it will continue, as it always has. Somewhere out there in the offices of the prefecture, files are being maintained that contain information about what happens in this city and what is managed and what is permitted and what is done. Vidal's files are somewhere in those offices, presumably the dossier he spent 2 years building, now evidence in an internal investigation that will conclude in whatever way such investigations conclude, when the people being investigated and the people conducting the investigation share certain common interests. The files from the Maison Renard, wherever they are now, in Lucy's hands or the ministry's or somewhere else entirely, they are files too. Records of what happened. The dates, the names, the careful accounting of a commerce that the city's official record cannot contain. Someone always keeps the records. That's what you're beginning to understand. Someone always knows. The city generates its secrets, and it generates its records of its secrets simultaneously, and the question is not whether the record exists, but who holds it, and what they choose to do with it. You're 21 years old. You're learning to be one of the people who holds things. Your hand moves across the paper, words, sentences, the attempt to make the experience of the past 3 weeks into something that holds still long enough to be read and understood and remembered. This is what you do. This is what you're learning to do. To take the city and put it on the page without killing it. To tell what happened without pretending you know everything about why. To name the system without pretending the system can be named away. The clock somewhere below you in the building strikes midnight. Tomorrow, the office, Jules, Pelletier with his newspapers, the daily business of paying attention. Tonight, the candle, the notes, the attempt. Paris outside, Paris below, Paris all around. The greatest city in the world, the most beautiful, the most complicated, the one that has been trying to understand itself for 200 years and has never quite managed it and keeps trying anyway. The city that put the tower up and called it a demonstration of what France can achieve, which is also true. The city that ran the Maison Renard and called it nothing at all, which is also true. Both things, held in the same air, under the same October sky, illuminated by the same electric lights and the same gas lamps and the same ancient candle, on the window-sill of a chambre de bonne on the Rue des Martyrs. You write until the candle gutters and the last of the light dies. Then you sit in the dark for a while, listening. The bells again, midnight. The sound carrying up from the street, from the churches, from the city's permanent and patient record-keeping of time. You cannot see anything, but you can hear everything. The building around you in its nighttime state, the subtle sounds of wood and stone settling against the cold, the woman's cough through the wall, quieter now, the woman sleeping and the cough working in her sleep, and the sounds of the city below, the undying city. You are warm enough, not comfortable. The room is cold and the chair is hard, but warm enough. You have the 17 francs and now 27. You have the story you didn't print and the story you did. You have a year of Paris settling into your body like ballast, like something that changes your weight in the world. You're fed enough. Pelletier feeds you decently, in the sense that 65 francs a month in Paris keeps you in jambon sandwiches and café crèmes and the occasional glass of wine in the Café Voltaire, which you now think of as yours, even though it has never been only yours. You are safe enough. Not from everything. Nobody in Paris is safe from everything. The city has too many things that can go wrong, and most of them are invisible until they're not. But from the particular danger that followed you through this summer, the danger of being the person who knows something, the person who has seen what the man from the Gironde did on the Rue des Petits-Champs, the person who sat across from Bernard and heard about the Rue de Rivoli and the Tuesday in March. That danger has largely passed. You are still the person who knows those things. But the story is printed and Vidal is in Normandy and Lucy is in Brussels, and the particular arrangement of forces that made the summer dangerous has dispersed into something different, the way weather disperses, the way all the specific atmospheric conditions that produce a storm separate back into ordinary air. Warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. That is more than it sounds like. That is more than many people in this city can say. The beggars at the base of the Sacré-Cœur scaffolding, the workers in the eastern factories, the young men who are still in establishments like the Maison Renard, in whatever form it takes now, in Brussels or Lyon or London or the next arrondissement. You are luckier than most of them and you know it. The dark room, the silence that isn't silence. Let it come now. Let the thinking stop. Let the city continue below while you rest. Tomorrow the Rue des Martyrs will do what it does. The fishmonger and the boulangerie and the Père Labarre and the slope of the hill carrying you down into the city. Tomorrow the office and Jules and Pelletier and the daily act of attention. Tonight, rest. The sounds of the city grow softer. Or maybe you're simply listening less. The way you stop listening to something when it has become part of the background of your life. When it has become not a collection of separate sounds, but the single continuous sound of being in a place. The sound of belonging somewhere, even provisionally, even imperfectly. Centuries will pass. The Paris you know will change beyond recognition. The tower will become an icon so thoroughly incorporated into the city's image that people will forget it was once a scandal. The Moulin Rouge will become something for tourists to visit. The streets you walk will be paved and repaved and paved again. The buildings will be renovated, their facades cleaned, every few decades of the black-grey soot that you know as the natural colour of Paris stone. The gas lights will go, and the electric lights will multiply, and then multiply again until the city glows from space. The prefecture will stand. The records will accumulate. The system will adapt. But people will still live here, still work here, still negotiate the gap between what is permitted and what exists, still carry their secrets down narrow streets in the second arrondissement on Tuesday afternoons, still find ways to survive that the official record prefers not to name. Some things don't change. The human need for the city, for the density and the anonymity and the commerce and the darkness and the beauty, all of it simultaneously, the whole thing. That doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day in a hard city, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it takes everyone who has worked long enough and walked far enough and paid enough attention that the body finally overrules the mind and the mind finally agrees to go. Let the streets go quiet. Let the candle's ghost warmth fade. Let your thoughts slow and soften, the list of names becoming not a list but a murmur, the Rue Sainte-Anne becoming not a street but a sound, Pelletier's voice becoming not instruction but a tone, the city outside becoming not a collection of specific sounds, but the single continuous sound of 2,000 years of living. You've earned this. Take it. The boy from Bordeaux in the Chambre de Bonne on the Rue des Martyrs 1 year into Paris, 10 francs richer than he was this morning and immeasurably older, closes his eyes. The last thing he hears is the church bell somewhere far away, marking an hour he's too tired to count. And then nothing. Just the dark. Just the city breathing around him, the way the city breathes around everyone it keeps. Just rest. Good night.